Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Tough times for social conservatives in America. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. In cyberspace, there are scores of vicious political websites that try to destroy people with whom they disagree. Both sides participate, but there are many more left-wing smear sites than right-wing. Enter the presidential race of 2016. Republican candidates are in the smear zone, especially if they speak out against liberal causes. Let me give you 3 examples. Here's Governor Scott Walker talking about abortion.
When I think of the ultrasound picture that Tonette, my wife, and I saw of our first son, who's now going to be 21 this June, it's indistinguishable not to recognize that that's a human life. That's why I'm pro-life.
Now, certainly that is a reasonable position. It's a matter of conscience. Yet the vicious Think Progress website, founded by top Hillary Clinton advisor John Podesta, ran a headline that said, quote, "Scott Walker, doctors should lie to pregnant women to prevent abortions." Now, Governor Walker never said anything close to that. But the Podesta crew doesn't really care. It's all about marginalizing Walker. Recently, Governor Mike Huckabee said this.
I think it's fair to say that Christian convictions are under attack as never before, not just in our lifetime, but ever before in the history of this great republic. We are moving rapidly toward the criminalization of Christianity.
Well, that's very provocative. The governor referring to merchants being forced to do things by the federal government that may run counter to their religious beliefs. In response, the despicable Daily Kos called Huckabee a spittle-flecked idiot doing his best to promote delusional anti-gay conspiracy theories. Finally, there's Senator Marco Rubio.
I don't agree with the notion that some are putting out there, including scientists, that somehow there are actions we can take today that would actually have an impact on what's happening in our climate. Our climate is always changing.
That same day, the Los Angeles Times ran a headline that said, quote, "Marco Rubio says human activity isn't causing climate change." Now, these kinds of attacks have changed politics because the websites know few readers will fact-check the headline. The pipeline works like this. Somebody says or does something, a website distorts the words or actions, takes them out of context. A bigger website like Yahoo, for example, picks it up with a provocative headline. Then the mainstream press grabs it. And again, context and content almost always ignored. Just the accusation is played up. So it's very easy to marginalize anyone with strong opinions. And since the press is overwhelmingly left, it is conservatives who get branded as kooks and extremists. Listen, they don't come any more extreme than Senator Elizabeth Warren. She's a socialist. If she gained power, our whole capitalistic system would be attacked by the federal government. Yet Senator Warren is in demand, a woman of stature. But if a political candidate is pro-life, skeptical of climate change, against gay marriage, or calling for welfare reform, that person is brutally assaulted, branded a bigot, anti-woman, anti-gay, against the poor. And this image stays with them because the news and entertainment industry is simpatico, generally speaking, with the uber-liberal thought. Believe me, I've experienced this for 19 years. I know how vicious the game is. But I can fight back. Others who are smeared cannot. Revolting situation that has affected our republic in a major way. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight, how will the smear merchants affect the upcoming presidential election? Joining us now from Washington, Charles Krauthammer. Can you put this in perspective for us?
Well, yes. I think the perspective is that the media have been left-wing since Marconi. But I'll go a little bit less back into history. 1964, several hundred psychiatrists signed a declaration, open letter, that Barry Goldwater, the Republican presidential candidate, was, in their view, psychiatrically unfit to hold the presidency. Now, that tells you how extreme it was way back in the 60s. I don't think there's anything radically changed. The fact that there are websites that run obscene headlines and, the ad hominem headlines, there's nothing new in this. And generally speaking, when it comes to the social issues, it depends which ones.
All right, now let me challenge that.
Let me give you one example.
All right.
If you run on extreme pro-abortion views, as did Wendy Davis in Texas, hailed as a second coming for the liberals in America, she was going to be the new star, she got crushed Whereas on gay marriage, we know which way public opinion is going. So it depends what the issue is.
But you got crushed in Texas, which is a very conservative state in general. Now, here's where I think you're wrong. In 1964, Goldwater got obliterated. All right, he lost to Johnson in a landslide, and part of the reason was that he was branded an extremist and a John Bircher and everything else, and then a lot of Americans bought it, and they were afraid he'd start a nuclear war. So the demonization of him worked. Now, it's light years faster than it was in Goldwater's days, because in Goldwater's days you had the newspapers, and you had the only three major network news covering. Now, these smear sites can, speed is light. This conversation that you and I are having will be on the political websites 10 seconds after we're off the air. And they do whatever they want to do. They could say Oreilly told Krauthammer he was an anti-Semite. Krauthammer told Oreilly he hated Australians. And nobody's going to check it out, Charles. Nobody's going to go back and look at the transcript of the conversation that you and I had. So surely you know the danger here.
I think it's less than before. I think the proliferation of websites makes them small and less significant. You go back to exactly the era you were talking about. 3 major networks, a couple of major national newspapers. They had a monopoly on the news. They were all liberal. They all put things through a liberal perspective, and that's how America got all its news. To the contrary, today you actually have a challenge to that monopoly. Fox News, talk radio, a page or two in the Wall Street Journal, and a few websites. In other words, you do have the revenge of the right. We are out there in many areas where we were not because these outlets didn't exist. I am less concerned about a few extra lunatic left-wing websites when the power of the media, which were entirely monopolized and run by liberals 50 years ago, has now been diluted.
All right. But there are, yes, I understand there are more voices in the choir. But you can't think that people like Ted Cruz hasn't been demonized. He has. He's been demonized. He's a Harvard grad. Whether you agree with his politics or not, he's a smart man. All right? He presents himself in a cogent way. He has been branded a far-right loon. All right? And a lot of Americans who don't pay attention, don't read the newspapers, don't watch Fox News, they buy it. And they just dismiss him. Like hey, well, he's just too crazy. That's what's happening.
But look, that's why we have a political process. He's going to have to run in the Republican primaries. Republican people who come out to vote in the caucuses and the primaries on the Republican side are not people who are going to swallow what the TPM says or COS says. They are going to be far more open-minded. They will be exposed to what's in Fox and other news sites. And if he were to get the nomination, then he has a platform. He has debates. He has speeches. He'll be out there, and it's not going to be a few little websites demonizing him. Americans will judge. Look, the left has demonized every Republican candidate since who knows, Abraham Lincoln maybe.
No.
But it's not going to, and that's not going to change.
All right, Charles. You and I have a respectful disagreement. See, we're respectful, Charles and I, you know.
Precisely.
I didn't attack him for having a tie that... Charles Krauthammer, everybody.
I'm in my lavender phase.
Yeah. One footnote, Things That Matter, Krauthammer's big bestseller, out in paperback tomorrow.